Hey, I hope you liked part 2. Let's go to part 3 and see what else we can find.
In California, between California and Nevada border, and
so if you were Japanese, you had to go there?
Huh?
If you were Japanese, you had to go there during the war?
Yeah. Oh, if you're Japanese or any even half, 1/4 Japanese, they're taken to the camps.
Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah, and
how many Japanese were in America at that time?
120,000.
120,000.
120,000, and 2/3 of them were U.S.-born citizens.
Wow.
And so there's a case in which U.S.-born citizens got rounded up and put in internment camps because, for no reason, no reason meaning they looked like the enemy,
right.
And of course their ancestors,
right.
of course, they attacked Pearl Harbor. And even though President Roosevelt was advised against not signing an executive order authorizing establishing a military zone for which to exclude people of a certain threat. No, it didn't say Japanese, it said people of a certain threat. Right. And it was meant to be. And but he really didn't have any choice, and the emotion was high, and
wow.
And they take it to the assembly center, and they're there for about a couple of months, and then they're shipped to different camps as the camps are finished, because the camps weren't finished, and so Manzanar was the first one to go up. And but so what do you do with 120,000 people? And
did they separate the families or keep them together?
The family.
They kept the families together or separate them?
Well, no, they kept the families together, but then when you have a dormitory with a building like this divided into 4, it was very difficult. I mean, the family of 4 in one room was absolutely too small, and so in some cases they're mixed, and it was not a very comfortable situation. I mean, eventually it was not meant to be comfortable. You just wanted to
Were you in one of these?
Well, yeah, my story is that my parents are in Terminal Island in Southern California when this was posted, and there were Terminal Island was next to the naval base.
Okay.
So instead of having maybe a week or 2 weeks to get rid of everything you have, they had 2 days to get out, get rid of everything you had, cars, to personal possessions, everything, and they're taken to Assembly Center, which is a horse track, and my parents were put into a horse stall as their living quarters for the next 2 months, and then they were eventually taken to Manzanar camp. And
were they treated horribly there?
Well, the thing is that my mother was 6 months pregnant when this was posted.
Wow.
And you can only take 1 suitcase, and your bedding, you can round it up, blankets and all that, you could take that with you separate, but personal items, 1 suitcase. So what can you take in 1 suitcase?
Not much.
And my mom said, so she took almost all the baby stuff, not knowing what the camp would have.
And she was 6 months pregnant.
Yeah, she was 6 months pregnant. And I was born in Manzanar, so I was in the camp for 3.5 years. First 3.5 years of my life was in an internment camp. But,
wow.
And the other camps are built all around, and they're shipped. Some went all the way to Arkansas, some in Idaho. A lot of them, San Jose, went to Arizona, and what was?
And which camp were you in?
I went to Manzanar.
Manzanar?
Manzanar camp.
Manzanar.
Yeah, and it's in California, Nevada border.
California, Nevada border. Okay.
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. in addition to 120,000, two-thirds of whom were U.S. citizens, about 1,300 were rounded up because they were identified as potential leaders of the Japanese community by the FBI.
Wow.
Edgar Hoover had done that long before war started, identify who could be the leader among them.
Right.
But they're arbitrary because all the ministers, Christian and Buddhist ministers, identified potential leaders. I mean, they're not the war type of guys, but they're potential leaders. They could convince people, talk to people.
Oh, I see.
And union leaders, and they get rounded up. And they were rounded up a day or 2 days after attack of Pearl Harbor. They're taken away, and they're placed into 10 Department of Justice camps. They all went to Texas.
Those are like prisons. They were like prisons, right?
Huh?
Like prisons? Department of Justice camps are like prisons?
Yeah. And they all ended up in the Crystal City, Texas. It's a huge compound there.
Oh, wow.
So the Japanese Americans, some Germans, some Italians ended up there.
Wow.
And so out of these camps, and from Hawaii, volunteered to go fight for this country. And it's amazing to me that how they're willing to go fight, but they all said, we need to prove our loyalty to this country,
right,
so that our parents will get out of these camps. And the best way to do that is go fight for this country. So 20,000 went to Europe.
Right, to fight.
Normally, a regiment may produce 1 or 2 Medal of Honor, or any U.S. military unit, but this regiment produced 21 Medal of Honor, and that's phenomenal. And I asked these guys, why was that
21 Medal of
possible?
Honor they earned? Wow.
They all said, because we were fighting with an extra motivation, that is to prove our loyalty to the country.
Wow.
So when the fighting got tough and when other American units would withdraw, they pushed on.
Wow.
And and the 3,000 secretly going to the Pacific side.
That's a great.
Which is another unique story. It is kind of interesting that all of them said, while interrogating a prisoner, first person that they interrogated always said, you are a traitor. You should be fighting for the Japanese side, not the American side.
Oh, when they got caught, if they got caught?
They're like he's a prisoner being interrogated by the...
Oh, I see.
Interrogated by
Japanese.
And they're always accused them.
Why do you have American uniform on, right?
And this is almost toward the end of the war, but Japanese general being interrogated by Japanese American soldier. And the ladies were good translators, and this is another unique story. There's a very famous Japanese general.
He looks familiar to me.
He is not in good terms with General Tojo because he was humane, and
he was humane.
He was humane in that when he occupied the country, his first directive to his men is that I don't want any rape, any pillaging, any of these things that soldiers are known for. I don't want any of those things.
Wow.
And but since he was a top commander, there are other units too, and those things are committed in a place like the Philippines. After the war, he was tried for being responsible for men committing atrocities.
Wow.
And the U.S. had to decide to what extent should the commanding officer be responsible for what men do, but decided that they're still responsible. So he was executed.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. He still looks familiar.
And that's just more pictures of the activity.
Right.
Harry Fukuhara, I knew him real well. And
Wow.
yeah. And our exhibit, permanent exhibit, is up there.
But
Go
it's
up
closed,
the stairs,
right?
but because of the COVID, it's closed.
Yeah.
We've got a lot more stuff.
I'm gonna
over
come
there.
back when it opens up.
Yeah, but please do when it's completely open, because you could spend hours there really looking at a lot of things. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it goes back to 1944, after a D-Day invasion.
Yeah.
American troops were chasing the Germans are retreating, and in northern France, one American battalion unit went too fast, and it got surrounded by Germans. And Hitler wanted victory because he hasn't had any. Hitler ordered the general, wipe those guys out. And so Texas Battalion, 275 men got trapped behind the German line. American units tried to rescue them, but they couldn't. So they retreated. And the general said, I can't have that. So they ordered these guys, you guys are good fighters, you guys go and rescue them. And they ran into the same resistance from Germans, but they were fighting to prove their loyalty, one extra motivation that they had, and they pushed on and pushed on, and they rescued it, successfully rescued 211 men out of 275 men.
Wow.
Trapped behind German line, and after 2 weeks after that battle, which is considered one of the most famous 10 most famous battles in the U.S. Army history, General wanted a formation of 442nd so that he could personally thank everybody for the accomplishments. He looked down there, and one company, I Company, instead of 150 to 200 men, only had 8 men standing in formation.
That's it.
Next to the K Company, instead of that, had only 13 men standing. So the general got upset. They told the regimental commander, I told you I wanted everybody out here, to which regimental commander said, that's all got left. They're
Wow.
either killed or the hospital or they're unable to come out.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that kind. So this is a very famous formation that
These are the ones that
symbolizes
showed
that.
up.
And this is that.
What's the
And
story
then
of this?
this picture. This Henry Lawson, and this is his L. He was with the rescued Texas Battalion. He is with the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. 35 on this day, 2 years ago, almost to the exact date, 75th anniversary of the rescue of the battalion, I took him to visit him. And
Really?
they're best of buddies anyway.
Wow.
I visited him. They had coffee ready, snacks ready. And I sat over here. And as I watched him talk about that day of the rescue, when he thought that Germans going to wipe them out, he wrote his last letter to his wife saying that this is a day that we're going to fight. And these guys broke through. You know, that emotion and the joy, and yet gratitude and all that can come together. He's recalling that, and he's talking about how tough it was to get to him. 5 days in a cold battle and taking a lot of casualties, but we finally got it because he said, we weren't going to give up. until we rescued you guys.
That's great.
And so they finally made it. And as I was hearing this, I gotta take this picture. So I would step back and took the picture. And I just want everybody to know that the rescue guy from this and the rescuer together. He passed away. He passed away last June. And he's still, but he's not.
What's his name?
Lawson Sakai, and it's Al Totorano. And he is 98 now, and he passed away in 97. And but it was such a emotional experience for me.
Yeah.
To sit there, listen to real fight, two heroes.
Right.
These guys are real heroes, and you're fighting the Germans for 5 days as the Germans try to get to them, and these guys trying to rescue them.
Wow.
And where other American units could not rescue, his 442nd rescued them.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So it's an amazing story.
It is an amazing story. Well, is this a comic book?
Yeah, this is a
Comic book?
One very well-known cartoonist, illustrator, did this.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you very much for visiting.
Well, Brian here just explained to me about the Japanese internment camps, and what an amazing story that he told. So I hope you enjoyed that. That was a nice treat on the USS Hornet today, unexpected.